afternoon, everyone. I must apologize for my voice. I'm actually recovering from COVID-19, and that's for a discussion for a different day. But it's really a pleasure to be here and an incredible honor to be on this panel for STIC's Women in Hard Hat event. I'm going to talk a little bit more around the softer issues around women in engineering, because I believe that that's actually where the heart of the conversation around gender balance sits. So I invite you along on this journey with me, and please also let this be an interactive discussion. You can pop some comments and questions into the chat box. So as a mom to a 2-year-old son, I often watch and wonder as he explores and figures things out for himself. His bravery makes me so anxious, but his inquisitive mind and his fiery spirit makes me urge him onto the next big thing that he wants to tackle. And I often wonder if I would parent differently if I were not an engineer, and if I were raising a daughter based on the unconscious biases that exist in this world, and those that I've experienced and that I watch driving the lives of so many women around me. And we often think that in order to change the world, we've got to do some grand gesture or make some magnificent feat or some magnificent changes that will change the way in which the world will remember us. But today, if I can change some of the unconscious biases that each of us carry and be better women, or empower a woman to be a better version of herself on her terms, I would have accomplished something great. If the world were a village of 100 people, 52 of those people would be women. According to the 2019 World Economic Forum study based on current trends, women will achieve economic equality in the workplace by equalizing the pay gap in 257 years' time. So despite study after study confirming that empowering women in the workplace isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing for business, because it increases profitability, return on investment, and increased innovation when women are empowered into senior leadership positions, we still see men hogging the leaderboard. Can we wait for the year 2277 for equal pay to happen for our women? We often talk about the engineering pipeline that refers to this pool of potential engineers that exist and how we can get them and retain them in the system. Whilst we're currently seeing large numbers of unemployed graduates and experienced professionals, the demand for skills will return as some of the structural challenges we see in the industry rectify, as highlighted by our previous panelists. But according to Access statistics for 2018 and 2019's annual report, South Africa has 21,446 professional engineers, where only 1,131 of them are female professional engineers. That's a mere 5%. And looking at some of the statistics of CISA member firms shows that only 11% of top management in consulting firms are female, and only 18% of those are in senior management. So how effective is an executive board that does not represent its constituents? This week in South Africa, we've had a big successful woman with the announcement of MPA Mott by Malini Padiachi and Ipileng Mukari. A win for them is a win for all women. But everyone has a different opinion and the answers on what causes this leaky pipeline from school into the C-suite. And we've talked at length about how to improve these numbers on various platforms like this one. And whilst these solutions are long-term, they're complex and they require interventions from many stakeholders. And it's very encouraging that Dr. Ramchund talked about a willingness from government to also engage on these issues. There's a number of things that we can each do in our personal capacity to help plug these holes in the leaky pipeline, and to have a profession and a sector that is better representative of our demographics of the country, and that also better harnesses the benefits of women in engineering. We've heard that there isn't enough female talent. We've heard that women engineers won't stay in your firm if you employ them, that women in engineering are not going to last. I read an article on the bridge on the river Choluteca. It was written for Business World by Prakash Iyer in April 2020. And he wrote of Choluteca in the Honduras in Central America. that was very susceptible to storms and hurricanes. In 1996, they decided that they're going to build a 484-meter long bridge over this river. So a Japanese firm built a bridge designed to withstand the powerful forces of nature. It was marvelous. But in October of 1998, Hurricane Mitch hit the Honduras, and rainfall, which was the equivalent of 6 months of rainfall, was experienced in just 4 days. Devastation followed, and 7,000 lives were lost. All infrastructure, including all the other bridges, were destroyed, all except this one. The new bridge was unaffected because it was built to last. I'm going to park this here and ask you to consider if you want to be a Choluteca River Bridge in your life, career, and in this engineering profession. And we'll come back and revisit this later. I'd like for the next part of my talk to be interactive, and I'd like to invite you to keep a mental note or engage with us in the chat box on how many unconscious biases have affected you personally or another woman you know. And for the men in attendance, be honest about some of the decisions you've made when you realize that they've been driven by unconscious bias. So by definition, unconscious bias is defined as prejudice or unsupported judgments in favor of or against one thing, person, or group as compared to another. And in that way, it's usually considered unfair. It's suggested that unconscious biases occur automatically in your brain as the brain makes quick judgments based on past experiences and background. As a result of unconscious biases, certain people benefit and other people are penalized. And if these biases drive so many of the factors that affect the engineering pipeline for women, how can we undo such things? Remember, we're keeping score of how many of these have affected you or someone you know. Let's look at some of the challenges that mount against women in the workplace. Number one, the glass ceiling that acts as a barrier to a woman's growth in a firm where she can see the next level to rise to, but her way to the top is blocked by a structural layer that those who pass through it, predominantly men, refuse to recognize. Number two is the glass elevator. That is the mystery by which a man will progress much faster in a female-dominated profession. So we see this often in professions like nursing, where a male nurse is praised for his exceptional ability to do a predominantly female role. But the same won't apply for a woman artisan in a plant environment, for instance. Number three, the glass cliff. That's when a woman is given that leadership opportunity at the point when the risk of failure is at the highest. For example, just before a company is about to start major retrenchments after several years of poor performance and mismanagement by a male manager. Number four, the motherhood penalty, which is the perception that women will tap out of the workforce and become slack as a result of children. Mind you, this even affects single women and those not on the motherhood track. The expectation is that working mothers will stay away more often and slack off work because they struggle to balance both those roles. However, many working mothers actually end up doing more than their male counterparts. That often equates to 2 jobs. Think about remote working during the lockdown. Number 4 is potential versus performance, where men are promoted on their future potential, whilst women will be promoted on their past performance. Number 6 is the likability factor, where men who are competent are seen as forceful, worthy of promotion, and are likely to succeed. But women who display this type of competence are often seen, both by men and women, as unlikable, unfeminine, very aggressive, conniving, and untrustworthy. This likability factor is also another lose-lose for women. Number 7 is the queen bee syndrome. And this is where some women in leadership consider their title and their status as a culmination of their own personal struggle. And sadly, they don't support their female juniors who need the support to move to the next level. And number 8 is the Athena factor. And that's when women in high positions in male-dominated fields suffer harsher penalties than men when they slip up. So often, when a man fails, his co-workers and even management dust him off and say, "Oh, there, buddy. You can try again next time." But when a woman fails, there's a mark of incompetence and inexperience that she has to carry with her. And we often see this in professional services, in professional services firms, where you are resourced for particular assignments. And this can be quite detrimental. So I'm sure that many of you would have scored at least 50% on this assessment of these 8 points. And there are many, many more issues that our unconscious biases drive that smaller, steady changes can bring. And there are other challenges that women face, the work-life balance being one. And this is the elusive system that a woman is expected to achieve to prove that she can and does have it all in every facet of life. And this is coupled with the challenges around flexible working hours, access to childcare and insufficient maternity leave, the convergence of women's biological and professional clocks, the role as your role as a mother, and the time demands of leadership positions also puts us at a disadvantage of attaining these leadership positions without a significant fight. There are other things, such as your career development and engineering opportunities. These often accompany a man's predominance in positions of organizational power. And they're coupled with the well-established professional and social networks. They provide good support bases for men to gain access, information, and support. Most women don't have access to this type of professional support systems. So the question that we should ask is, how can we create these systems for each other? There is the unintended consequences of what COVID-19 has brought to the new normal. How do we view the future world of work in a post-pandemic society? With an economy in recession, there's difficulty in doing business and workplaces becoming increasingly competitive. Working from home, there's flexi hours, homeschooling, you caring for sick children and parents, and technology that keeps you connected constantly. And this further blurs the boundaries between work and home. So although many more men have assumed an increasing share of household responsibilities, women continue to shoulder the major disruption that COVID-19 has brought to families and to workplaces. And as we talked about earlier, sexual harassment and gender-based violence has plagued our society and our workplaces. Harassment's not always reported for fear of victimization or for fear of job losses. And whilst men are also victims of harassment and fear losing their jobs, and we know that there's a stigma around being a male victim, the level of disrespect and violence aimed at women is both worrying. It's worrying for those raising daughters and should equally concern those who raise young men who will grow into men who either respect and cherish women or disrespect and disfigure. So if we're in such an unbalanced equation, why do we keep fighting for empowerment? It's like Lebo talked about earlier. Gender inequality and unconscious biases are fueled by a scarcity mindset when we feel threatened by each other. So not getting into the race doesn't mean that the inequalities that exist will organically correct themselves. If we are to take our rightful place at the table or build our own table like Lebo, Malani, and Refilwe, we need to be headstrong and tackle those male-dominated roles that we are told are not for us. But what can we do to turn things around now? One of my mentors and friends, Aisha Nada, says, women are natural builders. We build families, we build friendships, we build companies, and we build infrastructure. And in doing so, we each build our own careers. So here's how we can build each other. We can become a sponsor to other women and encourage men to do the same. So sponsorship is an active role, is the active role we take in giving another's career the boost that they need. Secondly, we can create a culture of inclusion wherever you are on the ladder. And it does not necessarily mean that if you're not in a senior leadership position, that you cannot empower on the rungs below you. Third is to look at the entire pipeline. If women don't get the right opportunities and support at the beginning and the middle of their careers, their chance of making it into top roles are even lower. And fourth, lift as you climb. As women, we can support other women by making an introduction. You can offer advice, nurturing ambition, encouraging people to step up and call out discrimination when we see it. And this is equally applicable to our male counterparts, who can often also lift as they climb. And when we empower women, we do more. When we empower women to do more and be more, we don't dilute our own power, we actually strengthen it. After all, a rising tide lifts all boats. So we can change the narrative from being the female engineer to being the engineer. Remember we talked about the Choluteca River Bridge. I'm going to see if I can share something with you. So here's the Choluteca River Bridge. After everything we've discussed today, would you still like to be this bridge, built to last? Let's check out this bridge. Although the bridge remained unaffected after the hurricane, everything else around it was swept away when the river changed course. So whilst the bridge survived these extreme conditions and it survived the hurricane, it became a bridge over nothing, a bridge to nowhere. And although this is a 22-year-old story, its applicability has never been more apt. Our world is changing at an unimaginable pace. I'm sorry, I'm just going to stop sharing. You would have seen the river changing course. Our world is changing at an unimaginable pace. And drawing a parallel of the Choluteca Bridge to what can happen to us in our lives, our careers, to gender balance, and our businesses, as the world transforms, we need to be able to adapt to the change. And this relates to our skills and experience and whether they will become redundant, such as will physical office space. So for a short time ago, we assumed that physical office space was a sure bet. But now we're not really certain as to the things that we thought were sure bets and how that will pan out in future. In closing, I'd like to talk about what we can do moving forward. And Sheila Woodnall is an MIT professor, and she was the first female secretary of the Air Force, US Air Force, and she addressed the National Academy of Engineering in the year 2000. She said, "If women don't belong in engineering, then engineering as a profession is irrelevant to the needs of our society. If engineering doesn't make welcome space for them and embrace women for their wonderful qualities, then engineering will become marginalized as other fields expand their turf to seek out and make place for women." The bridge analogy articulated so well that we get the best solution to a given problem, that we lose sight of the fact that the problem itself might change. So with the bridge analogy, do you want to be built to last or built to adapt? Our industry needs to remove the unconscious biases and adapt to a more inclusive and diverse profession. So do you want engineering to be the superb bridge over nothing to nowhere? I think not. Thank you very much, Chair. Over to you.